Should you miss on those guys, or you're in a way more competitive league, Wolf, none of them are available in my league. All right, well, 8% Demario Douglas. I bet you he's out there in at least a handful of your leagues out there. He is right around my fringe top 10 pickups of the week, but very impressive peripherals here in week 7. And I think the role could only grow. Plus, week 7 upside's really high here for Demario Douglas. Let's dive into it. 29% target share this last week, leading the Patriots with 32% targets per route run as well. So on 9 targets, that's his third time in the last 4 weeks seeing exactly 9 targets, a nice and steady roll. 18.2 half PPR fantasy points with a 37% air yard share, thanks to an 8.8 average depth of target. That's the big rub here. That's why I am actually far more excited about Demario Douglas than I typically get about this guy. Normally, Zadok's right around 3 or 4, kind of that Wan'Dale Robinson catching the ball, and I'm going down. No, we saw more deep game unlocked with Drake May forcing the ball downfield to Demario Douglas, who did a lot of quality stuff with his work. And now, getting a more vertical roll. The one rub here, too, is he's only out there for 67% of the routes. And that's kind of like, what are we doing there? This guy is clearly your best weapon. And after the game, we did have Gerard Mayo come out and say, Demario Douglas, Pop Douglas is our go-to guy. We also do trust as well, ultimately, those, he said, Kayshawn Boutte, and it wasn't Jalen Polk, the other guy that he trusted. So he did cite Demario Douglas as the one that he wants to ride moving forward. And you get the Jags coming up this week. Most fantasy points allowed to receivers by a mile, just like we talked about with Drake May, why we think he is a great ripping right out of the package and start him from your waiver wire pickup day. I think Demario Douglas is in for a great game as well. Plus 14.5 schedule-adjusted fantasy points to wide receivers are the Jags allowing. Yes, their wide receivers put up nearly over 2 touchdowns worth of points more when they face the Jags here. And so I expect a huge game in London for Drake May, for Demario Douglas, his number one weapon there. A guy I would be prioritizing should I miss on the Packers guys or Juju Smith-Schuster. The rest of these receivers fall a nice tier or two below those other pickups, but still worth shouting out. A guy like Xavier Legette, who had that huge week 4. We all saw 24% target share, 88% of the routes, 19.6 fantasy points. Very impressive day. Week 5 comes and he gets a shoulder injury. It's against Chicago, who's locking down every receiver. But then right back to a pretty solid day here in week 6 with 3 catches, 23 yards, and a touchdown. Nothing huge, but still getting in the end zone. You get to see the horse gallop celebration. And who's better to root for than Xavier Legette? What a fun player that this man is. Ultimately played over 75% of the routes here, right back in that every down roll. Thing with him, though, is Adam Thielen could be coming back at some point. You still think this team should be committed to their young talent here, figuring out what they have. Yet Deontay Johnson trade rumors as well. Who knows what will happen, but we know Dave Canales does love this guy. And then we wrap up receivers with 2 more names, Rashod Bateman and Michael Wilson. Which one should you prefer, whether you need a streamer or more of a stash? Let's dive in to first Michael Wilson here. Finds the end zone in that loss, and good thing he did, because otherwise it was a forgettable day. 4 targets, 2 catches, 21 yards, but does get that touchdown. And now in his last 4 weeks, he's got 9 or more half PPR points in 3 of his 4 games. Very, very solid here. And we got Marvin Harrison also suffering that concussion. We'll see whether he's sidelined. It's Monday night, so you kind of have to wait it out and see. But that's what's kind of the tricky part here with Michael Wilson, because if Marvin Harrison plays, it's going to be tough to trust him. And you look at his schedule, the Chargers, 27th in points allowed. Miami, 30th in points allowed. Chicago, 28th. And then the Jets, 29th. The next 4 games, all bottom 5 matchups here for Michael Wilson. So it is tough to love this guy heading into this next stretch. Meanwhile, Rashod Bateman, who's not really on any of these lists, nobody's really talking about him. He also has 9 or more points in 3 of his last 4 games. But the schedule is much juicier here for Rashod Bateman. Tampa Bay, 7th most points. Cleveland, 9th most points coming up in their next 2 battles here. Coming off a solid 4-catch, 70-yard day here for Rashod Bateman. His last game out, season high in yardage. Has 2 touchdowns across his last 4 weeks as well. Not bad production here from Rashod Bateman. We all know, the average separation score according to fantasy points, has always been high for Rashod Bateman. Yeah, it's tricky because it's clear Zay Flowers is by far the number 1 here. Now we got Mark Andrews reemerging a little bit. So it's going to be tough to trust Bateman, who has only seen 4, 1, 8, and 4 targets. But I do think over these next couple of weeks, if I had to choose between Wilson and Bateman, plug somebody into my lineup, I do prefer playing the matchups here with Rashod Bateman myself. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.